The intellectual elite.
Intellectual elite.
Intellectual elite.
The intellectual elite. Know-it-all, academic, soy latte, vegan, complete the Saturday New York Times crossword puzzle, coastal, kale, intellectual elite. Why is intellectualism always equated with elitism?
Because we live in a meritocratic system, so the smarter you are, the more money you're gonna make, the more likely you are to gain power and influence.
Maybe because in a time when facts don't matter and authority gets its strength from blind trust, knowledge isn't power, it's a problem.
Well, no, you're just giving the middle finger to people who don't trust what they deem the liberal media. You don't trust the places they get their news from and make their opinions, and they don't trust the places you get your news from and make your opinions.
Maybe it's our puritanical roots, or maybe it's Fraser Crane. But Americans don't like intellectuals.
No, they don't like being called stupid or being lied to.
That's why in American politics, not knowing much or appearing like you don't can be seen as a virtue. It shows that a politician is down to earth, relatable, someone you could have a beer with, or 5 beers with, or however many you had before you passed out and they drew it weighing on your forehead.
They call them know-it-alls, people that have their head in the clouds and think they know everything, but they don't know shit.
Anti-intellectualism is what made someone from one of the most elite families who graduated from one of the most elite universities appear to be of the people.
To those of you who received honors, awards, and distinctions, I say well done. And to the C students, you too can be President of the United States.
And then one day a war criminal.
The attack on Afghanistan was a response to an attack on American soil, and Saddam Hussein was a sadistic murderer who was responsible for 50,000 to 100,000 of the lives of his own people, not to mention those of Iranians and Kuwaitis. It was badly done, though, I will give you that.
And of course, back then, no one could have imagined a more grotesque celebration of hawkish anti-intellectualism until the primaries of 2016.
We won with young, we won with old, we won with highly educated, we won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated. We're the smartest people, we're the most loyal people.
And that's just it. Trump loves the poorly educated because they're loyal.
They're loyal to him because he's pandering to them and he's not the status quo. He's not the same candidate they've seen for the past 30 years that hasn't done anything for them.
Just like peasants, or beagles, or Eric. They don't know any better. The less educated you are, the less capacity you have to think for yourself. And the less capacity to think for yourself, the easier it is to blindly place your trust in authority.
But they didn't place their trust in authority. They voted out the status quo as far as the Republican Party was concerned. It's people who think they're smart that talk down to them about shit they don't know anything about that really make them mad.
And Trump was right to love the poorly educated because he went on to win the election in large part thanks to voters without a college education.
That and the alternative was a button many people of different IQ levels couldn't bring themselves to push.
He vastly outperformed Clinton in the 50 least educated counties in the country, where people might not have minded a president who literally speaks at a 4th grade level.
Fake news. Literally opinionated bias to make people trust the news media even less.
Trump's lack of a
flowery, effervescent vocabulary
or coherence is part of the Republican brand, though, to distance themselves from the elite classes they are indeed a part of in order to gain the trust of the general public, who they ultimately plan to f*** over.
All politicians try to relate to the common man. If you can't relate to them, you can't represent them.
And it's been happening for decades.
This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
It's called an oligarchy. Americans don't really like oligarchies. That's what Ronald Reagan was talking about.
Yeah, don't trust anyone who knows what they're doing. Trust the guy from Bedtime for Bonzo, whose brilliant economic plan is just his name with nomics on the end.
Well, if the government was actually small enough, we wouldn't have to worry about Bonzo because he wouldn't have enough power to affect our lives in any significant way.
And hear how Paul Ryan peddles the same anti-intellectualism today.
We do not believe that we should be governed by elites. We do not believe that there are experts or elites who should steer us in their preferred direction.
So good to hear you support regular folks, Paul. I'm sure the Medicare for All iron worker Randy Bryce will appreciate your endorsement for Wisconsin's 1st District. Oh hey, isn't that your district?
Because Randy would never pander to people about an elite class of people ruling over us and how that's bad.
One way the right equates expert knowledge with elitism is by painting higher education as the enemy.
President Obama once said he wants everybody in America to go to college. What a snob.
Next, he'll want us all to have health care, and some of us don't want to have to wait 50 years to meet Jesus.
Well, not everybody needs to go to college. There's a lot of jobs you can get straight out of technical school that'll pay more than a lot of college graduates get. Plus, we have that whole student debt crisis right now.
But it's easy for the right to demonize higher education as elitist because college itself is so inaccessible. And instead of working to make it more accessible by lowering tuition and alleviating student debt, right-wingers make education even more expensive by gutting public schools in favor of expensive private ones.
No, it's pretty much a supply and demand thing. Anybody can get a student loan to go to college, and they can pretty much get as much money as they want. So colleges can increase their prices as much as they want.
It's almost as if it's in some people's political interest to keep people poorly educated. I just described Betsy DeVos's job.
Betsy DeVos's job shouldn't exist.
Meanwhile, the GOP continues to parrot down-home working-class solidarity, which is mostly crap. For instance, that lunch that Santorum was speaking at was for Americans for Prosperity, the nonprofit group of libertarian Sith Lord billionaires, the Koch brothers, a group that regularly supports union busing and is vehemently against raising the minimum wage. Feel the solidarity.
Look, you gotta pick one: $15 minimum wage or more jobs or robots. If you do the $15 minimum wage, the companies are going to pick robots. They're eventually going to pick robots anyway.
But please, go on, Rick.
They're good, decent men and women who go out and work hard every day and put their skills to test that aren't taught by some liberal college professor and trying to indoctrinate them.
And that, right there, is the second prong to the right's anti-intellectualism, painting higher education not just as elitist, but liberal.
It is liberal, and there's data to back that up. These people don't like that idea of the government telling you how to live your life, and they don't want to send their children to have you teach them that. What's there to, I don't get where the confusion is.
Many universities are becoming bastions of liberal bias rather than institutions for higher learning.
There's a bias in favor of liberal points of view on campuses that are run by government.
It's a joke that these elite universities claim to be bastions of academic freedom when really they're only bastions of political correctness.
Yeah, to the right, universities are bastions of political correctness because there are lessons on the French Revolution, gender studies, and consent.
Yeah, and you can't get a job using any of that.
So it's no wonder that after all this bashing of college, 1 out of 3 Americans now thinks that higher education does more harm than good. Also, 1 in 4 Americans believes the sun revolves around the earth, which probably means 2 out of 3 Americans think college gives you skin cancer.
They probably just don't think learning about 12 genders is worth $200,000 of debt.
And it is true that adults that are more highly educated have more so-called liberal thoughts on social issues and the environment. Things like climate change is real and universal health care will help people, and other ideological nonsense, also known as facts. But the right combats these realities taught in universities by dismissing them all as simply overly sensitive political correctness that discriminates against conservative viewpoints.
I don't know that they argue that climate change and universal health care are anything to do with sensitivity or political correctness. I think it's more of an economic issue of how we're going to afford it and who's going to pay for it.
Take Charlie Kirk. This 24-year-old runs a group called Turning Point USA that professes so-called free speech on college campuses by, say, keeping a menacing list of liberal professors on its website.
Yes, the Southern Poverty Law Center does that too, and so does Antifa.
Listen to Kirk justify his campus crusade.
Look, a university is supposed to be a place where disagreement, the free flow of ideas happen, where people can say, I respect your opinion, but I respectfully disagree. Universities are no longer those places.
Time out. Charlie Kirk never actually went to college. Why would he? He's on Fox.
How does that make his argument wrong?
Time in.
They are really islands of totalitarianism, where if you disagree with the faculty, the professors, the administration, or the left-wing students on campus, you can't respectfully disagree. You will be silenced, you will be suppressed, and you will be called a racist.
Or, Charlie, you will be called a racist because it turns out your organization is pretty f***ing racist.
Isn't Candace Owens a part of that organization?
The thing is, Turning Point USA does exactly what Kirk imagines liberal universities are doing. Propaganda. He admits to taking money from fossil fuel interests and then working against fossil fuel divestment campaigns. In fact, the right as a whole has had a way bigger hand in university education than they let on.
Doesn't mean that the schools are not still liberal and full of ideas that they disagree with.
Since the 60s, right-wing think tanks and private family foundations have poured billions into universities to promote free market thinking. There's the Olin Foundation, which started the conservative Madison program at Princeton and has supported right-wing ideologues from Samuel Muslims Can't Do Democracy Huntington to Dinesh Welfare is Slavery D'Souza. Or the Bradley Foundation and its support of gutting Wisconsin's education budget. But please, please, Charlie, tell me about liberal totalitarianism.
It's not liberal totalitarianism, it's Marxist totalitarianism. It's people who want the government to be in charge of everything instead of individuals being in charge of themselves. There's a lot of nuance in the debate, but that's pretty much the argument.
For decades, one-percenters have worked hard to correct the liberal bias that comes with more knowledge, because they know that higher learning has been linked to beliefs in things like democracy, equality, deductive reasoning, and other stuff that makes you look at the Republican tax plan and go, wait a minute.
I read recently it's more about trying to keep up with China because their GDP is growing so much faster than ours is. If they pass us, then we'll have to go by their rules in international commerce.
They hate that higher education, despite their best efforts, does not turn you into a mindless worker bee with a malleable brain and nimble fingers with which to assemble the robots that are eventually going to take your job assembling robots until one day you wake up and go, hey, how come all the immigrants are taking my robot assembling robots jobs?
Well, a robot taking your job should be a bigger fear than an immigrant taking your job, but you can make a lot of money if you know how to assemble and fix robots.
Now listen, call me a New York Times crossword puzzle, soy, kale, coastal, Frasier, kale, elitist intellectual if you want.
You don't have to have a college degree to like those things.
All I have is a bachelor's degree, a bunch of books I haven't read on my shelf, and my spirit animal is Cardi B.
You should read some of those books on your shelf. You should read a book by a libertarian.
It doesn't take a genius to realize that the plan to simultaneously defund and then delegitimize education is a way to keep us all very dumb.
You keep talking about financing in college and financing in high schools and middle schools and elementary schools like they're the same thing. They're not the same thing.
To keep us shopping on credit, blaming immigrants, and hailing the biggest anti-intellectual of them all.
He's not as dumb as George Bush.
So maybe stay in school and stay woke. Can I still say woke in 2018?
I think it's getting rather tired as a buzzword, but nobody's trying to legislate against you saying it yet.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching Newsbroke. I'm Francesca Fiorentini. Please follow me on Twitter and let us know what you think about this allergy to intellectualism that Americans often have. Where does it come from?
It comes from videos aimed at jobless college graduates that talk about you like you're an idiot.
And how does it play out in your life and maybe in college? Are you in school or not? Also, why is it that people who have a college education are automatically pitted against people who don't have a college education? Shouldn't we just help everyone and actually, raise the minimum wage, make sure that college educated people aren't just baristas?
You don't need a college education to be a barista, but it is nice to know that you're going to have a job if you're going to get that certain college degree.
Not that there's anything wrong with being a barista. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching.